You never thought this day would come, and you never thought that I'll be making a video. Welcome to the emergency broadcast edition of Megabits. And from my bedroom, I basically rigged up the setup in around 5 minutes, and it doesn't look great. Sure, I could have spruced it up, but this might be my permanent home for megabits for a while. I did want to touch this up because I did have a lot to say about this recent emerging news that basically came out. Bluefin Distribution, because I wanted to expressly state that they're not really much of a great distribution company. We have in Australia two companies that are competing with each other for the import game. There is Hobbyco, and then there's also Frontline Hobbies, which is also importing their own products, and it's practically the only two competitions we have at the moment. For a while, Hobbyco has always been the premier importer for a lot of the plastic model kits, Gunpla in particular. There's a huge Gunpla scene in Australia. It's starting to emerge, and we started getting more legitimized events thanks in part to having Katsumi Kawaguchi. Nowadays, it's kind of really shrunk down, and the it's pretty much gone to an extremely niche crowd, mostly because that the lack of community support and how much has changed over the years, which I tapped out for a long time, and seeing the overall growth of Gunpla now, it's kind of just saddening. The Bluefin Distribution for a while has been the American arm for importing Gunpla. They've also been importing Tamashii Nations, a lot of the Japanese products from Plex, and also Storm Collectibles, just to name a few examples here and there. Problem here is that we're dealing with Kamen Rider specifically. Kamen Rider as a property hasn't really been well marketed in the United States. It's pretty much one of those properties that is treated as a niche product in the same way it is treated in the same way as Mobile Suit Gundam, or Ultraman specifically. You mostly find a lot of the Kamen Rider stuff way before Bluefin was even in these operations in places like Outer Limits. Let me just see where Outer Limits is based, because I have the book. They did have an article surrounding it many years back. Especially in the 1990s, there were orange sticker imports for a lot of Japanese products. And if we go way back in the 1980s to 1970s, a lot of stuff was being imported by Marakai Trading, and there's a lot of bootlegs being circulated into places like Chinatown and any other marketplace. What I'm trying to say is that importing has been always been a thing. It's always been a part of commerce ever since the start of civilization. My point stands is that importing will never go away, and it is, and I'll touch onto it much more later on when it comes to the news. So you have these hobby stores like Outer Limits in the United States, which is located in the East Coast. Meltdown in the West Coast. I don't even think where Meltdown even exists anymore, but it's strange to see that that these shops don't carry a lot of temporary stuff at the time. And even when this published, they weren't even carrying any of the modern toys. They were all vintage diecast toys, which were all catalogued in this book. Cost me a lot of money, just as a side note. So, but Kamen Rider specialty products, they were starting to get a lot of attention within the mid 2010s when the demand for them pretty much increased when internet spaces started becoming much more streamlined. You used to have forums like Robot Japan, Toy Box DX. I believe that also had forums here and there. There's also Henshin Justice Unlimited and Ranger Board specifically as well that were pretty much circulating a lot of its fans and trying to get as much product as possible through any means whatsoever. Whether it just go through websites like Hobby Link Japan, Army, going to the Mandarake or Anime Jungle stores in Japan as a source of importing and then just like sending it over to their friends, or even going to places like Kimono My House, which has been a staple Japanese store since like the 1980s, and it's not one of those relics that do does give a lot of memories for a lot of robot collectors here and there. it has its place. It's been like second staple to a lot of the robot collectors because it's kind of really in the same vein of like exotic Japanese collectibles. In 2010, there was essentially an arm called Team Kamen, and they were pretty much the spokespeople behind a lot of the importation game, specifically in part for Bluefin distribution. They were trying to get Kamen products easily as possible, and I know understand why, because import taxes in the United States are relatively expensive. And it goes the same for Europe. Australia is a bit different. We pay GST here and there, but it is much more cheaper to import from Japan than it is from the United States. So there's a bit of a kerfuffle when it comes to the importing part of this topic. My point is that a lot of this product is much more easier to get. Not now necessarily, but this is very recently, like since like 2002, 2020s. There's just a bunch of people trying to collect like deluxe products and CSMs, and I don't know, I don't recall if there was any other offerings that were pretty much available, but the biggest problem here is that the market is so limited. What do I mean by limited by this? Well, if you look at a lot of the advertising in the last 10 years, all of it was directly aimed at young adults. And with Kamen products, especially the deluxe stuff, is specifically all aimed for children, or more like a very generalized audience. Children specifically like it because possibly of the over-designed nature of a lot of these products. Children don't necessarily like streamlined product. They like things that shout in your face. They want things that can basically make lights and sound. They have a greater sense of imagination. So, you get a lot of products that are essentially like in your face, trying to be very colorful, and it works. The marketing angle, at least in Japan, it pretty much explains this, particularly with the accompanying television shows that go with it. Um, that doesn't seem to be the case with the United States, because what ends up happening is that there are so many people, wide range of demographics, right? Um, they just end up having to direct themselves to the young adult audience because they have the most disposable income. Um, they technically have the means to pay for these products. They technically have the shelf space to display these products. They technically have the means to advertise these products. And not by advertising financially, but advertising through PR. Specifically, you got Twitter, you got Facebook, you got forums, you got YouTube, and there's these avenues that just so they can basically create hype for these new products here and there. And it seems like they were banking hard on their own market audience to do all the work. And you see where this is going here, because lack thereof any marketing. And this is where you get the scenario where we are right now. They have decided ultimately to pull out all the Kamen Rider products aside from the Tamashii Nations produced stuff. Ultraman still remains. A lot of the other stuff still remains. Storm collectibles. Candy toys is a bit of an undecided fate. Gashapon's probably also been on the rise because there's been a bunch of shops popping up recently, especially in Australia as well. I haven't gone to the Australian Gashapon stores recently, so there's here and there. But all of the products that make the bulk of Kamen Rider, they're no longer being circulated. And this comes down to many things, and my main problem is that Bandai of America isn't very well represented in advertising. They're not great marketers specifically. Legacy wasn't greatly marketed. It didn't necessarily have much of a marketing avenue. It relied so much on its market base to basically do all the work for them. There's also the fact that ever since the 1980s, when they were just importing products to Toys R Us, and even with the Godaikins, they were having hard times just trying to move that product around, because most of the time, they're not very well versed in marketing budgets. what really drove them was possibly other avenues. I believe this basically extends to the Stretchoid Warriors in the 1980s. Mighty Morphin Power Rangers specifically, it was the golden example that they tried to capture the lightning in the bottle. Um, that for another story, but my point is that don't seem to have the same wavelength as many other toy companies do, the contemporary ones specifically. Hasbro isn't really much of a great example because they're not really doing much with Power Rangers, and all of their marketing focuses is now online. So, and even Mattel as well is also very questionable at best. Not only do you get lack of marketing by any conventional means, you don't get marketing even through distributing your television shows. Kamen Rider as a whole isn't really dependent on the television show anymore. Tokusatsu television can be distributed as a supplementary item. But what really kills it is that most people wouldn't even know that some of the stuff is even available in like store shelves. Um, New York City seems to be like their great capture market because like there's a huge I wouldn't say it's a huge fan base, but there's a more vocal variety in terms of like why people want to sell their products in New York. It's always been a marketing tactic that they always use. If you can make it in New York, you can pretty much succeed. That's how Nintendo pretty much started their whole entire US takeover in 1985. Test marketing in New York in 1987. They distributed everywhere else. Here it's more like Kamen Rider never really got much of a strategy. There's really nothing that they did to basically push a lot of its items. We're talking like $90 to thousands of dollars worth of product here, right? We're not talking like we're not talking small item trinkets. We're talking like big ticket items. The base products, the DX belts that usually go for like $50 to $100 depending on what belt it is. And CSM items going up to like upwards of 500s to thousands of dollars. The types of products that can only be afforded by those with the disposable income. And believe me, I have the disposable income for one CSM belt because I literally have a CSM Ultra Ring. And it's the only CSM I'm ever going to buy because there's not really any other CSMs that I particularly would like because they're all out of my price range. There are other things that I want to get that are within that price range that will probably be better than a CSM, which are not toy related. So, keeping that in mind, you got problems with people trying to figure out what they want to do with their money. But also, they shot themselves in the foot because they're offering very little products. You're only getting so much as the premium stuff. There's not much of the mid-range, lower end products going around, especially those that are trying to get pushed into smaller markets. That's where the problem lies. It seems as if there's not many software beats, not many action figures, and there's not many supplementary items that pretty much complement the whole entire series. Because you have to think about this for 1 second. When was the last time you ever went in the store that stocked a lot of Kamen Rider products and they barely even had any Sotheby's? And I'm talking like places like GameStop, not anything specialty like Book Off or any second-hand stores or any specialized collector stores like I mentioned earlier. Because a lot of this stuff is being purchased through GameStop, but there is no soft vinyl figures, there is no ancillary accessories or any ancillary items for the main items to supplement it with. Remember, we're dealing with collectible gimmicks here. So, there is not much going around in these GameStops. At least from a lot of the pictures that I've been able to seen in the last few years. It's always CSM. It's always the DX, a base item. And they're always going up for a hefty markup because, of course, they need to get their money back. And this rolls around for the importing stuff, kind of ends. Is that Are they pretty much pulling out because people are rather wanting to import rather than actually going directly through these avenue streams? And there is a bit of a yes to or no to that because, like I said, importing has been around for millenniums, ever since the inception of civilization. It's been a part of commerce, and taking that huge part of commerce away is pretty much that's just dumb. That's just a dumb argument. Why would you even think about that? Um, Now, because of that, you got places like Mandarake, secondhand stores, which open up their official storefronts. But the only problem with Mandarake is that you can technically only purchase one item of a quantity at a time. If you want a second quantity, you have to get like a different type of item, which varies in condition, in box, or the physical product itself. So it means you're technically getting two, but they're not brand new. Of course, a lot of the stuff secondhand is at least being opened, expected. Some of them are unused, some of them are untested, mostly because they didn't get the time to test it. So that's where a lot of the stuff basically becomes a bit of a treasure trove, and it ends up becoming cheap. You might as well be gambling your money at this point. You also have like Toe Collectibles, very reputable in the United States because they've been getting a lot of the contemporary stuff for the American market. It is directly designed for the American market because they're based in the United States, and the shipping and overall options available for the United States, particularly for P Bandai products here and there, are made accessible. There's the thing. P Bandai is apparently still available, but that's like a very small sector. Like, once again, it's a very controlled sector of the market that only really is specialized for fandom specifically. Not specifically for the average Joe or any parents that think that they saw this that their kids want. Um, really getting into that. Some parents might be able to do that. I mean, like, there's some kids that manage to get like $100 action figures for Christmas or birthdays, but necessarily this is very specialized in terms of the fandom wise. Of course, a lot of the prices do vary depending on like where you get it from, and obviously you might be able to get it cheaper than what Bluefin or Bandai America was selling it for at base price. Um, that was one of the reasons why they dropped out of the United States market, is because Kamen Rider products weren't moving. Ultraman, however, is moving because there is a plan set in stone by Super Eye Productions to pretty much expand in the United States. We've got the upcoming Ultraman Rising that's coming to Netflix, and there's also the Ultraman Arc, which also got announced just recently, and recently Ultraman Blazer also got simulcasted with both English subtitles available. Super Eye has been a wild card because they had a redemption arc ever since they won uh, you know, story for a night. And even so, in the last, and even so at the last Comic Con, they had a bigger presence than Kamen Rider ever had. And there was rumblings about like Kamen Rider is not doing so well, and one of the executives at Bandai America pretty much hating the idea of selling Kamen Rider products and wanting to sabotage its own marketing plan. Now, of course, this isn't relatively new because that got swept under the rug, and I couldn't really find any more evidence of this because the tweets have been deleted. But I pretty much thought about this for a moment, and thought about it even now because when they're pulling out the US market for all the DX stuff, non-Tamashi stuff, it saw the dots start connecting. So, utterly ridiculous, you may ask, but like, also at the same time, they shot themselves in the foot with so many opportunities here and there. I remember people were complaining about like an exclusive Ichigo figure, which was a collaboration. This was like the first P Bandai product that was going up for pre-order, and people were complaining like, you expect me to pay for this shit? which is something that I don't even want. And then entrapment pretty much comes into place. Um, if any of these products that are non-desirable, not in demand by any of the customers, and then they pull out, and then they start gaslighting their own audience. It's like, why aren't you paying for this stuff? You don't support the North American market. This is literally entrapment. This is deadly because this is essentially almost, I would say borderline illegal, but it's very immoral, unethical marketing, to say the least. Like I said, shooting themselves in the foot. You're not giving the customers many options. You're not giving many of the customers much variety in terms of like what they want to buy and what they should be buying. And like you look at its overall product line compared to what Bandai America is doing right now. Dragon Stars, the anime heroes. Pretty sure they did some video games here and there, but all of them, they were very basic action figures. None of them look particularly that good. But the point was that they're cheap, kids can collect them, and a kid would be enticed to buy more of them because they're affordable at about $20 a pop. And they can build a huge collection, just even if it doesn't look that great. It's a great option compared to SH Figure Arts. I mean, to me, SH Figure Arts is always key, but I can see why the options are there. Kamen never really got many of those options, especially with the model kits as well. They're like $60 a pop, but they don't particularly look that great because they're relatively designed in mind to be modified. So that's all the work you have to do yourself. So that invalidates the model kit argument. So to summarize a little bit of my ramblings here, we got Bandai America. Not great tacticians, not great marketers, which seems to have pulled out, shooting themselves in the foot with Kamen Rider, and then just like, no more products for the United States market, aside from the SA Figure Arts. Again, that's a very small paltry sum of products available to the US market. Then you got yourself, then it leads to themselves entrapment, and then you get this whole entire situations of gaslighting and infighting and whatever. But we all know that they have sought their eyes for other varieties of options here. So it's not necessarily a huge deal if you're still collecting and you still understand how you're trying to get a lot of these products through a bunch of hoops. But if you wanted the convenience, that's all gone. So there you go. You don't really have many options left. You're gonna have to pretty much deal with what everyone deals with in the 1990s, trying to source imports from other channels that really necessarily exist. Talking to toy store owners, and then like talking to your mates, and then trying to score the best deals as much as possible, like conventions here and there, tape trade cycles, and going back full circle. It's strange because like I recently just went to a convention last week, and the amount of products that were at my friend's booth, a lot of Megazords were there. Roleplay toys were selling like hotcakes. Kamen Rider stuff was also selling, in part thanks to Chris being there and selling his own products here. Shout out to Outer Space Reviews for this one here. But my point is that even though that you might have established a very small, unique market, it's not big enough to generate the sales. But you also end up shooting yourselves because you offered products that are way too expensive. Most of those couldn't even afford CSMs. Most of them couldn't even afford Memorial Editions. Most of them couldn't even afford Complete Editions, Ultra Replicas, Proplicas, Tamashii Labs. The whole plethora of replica markets is only designed for like the 10% of people that actually have the money that are destined to be super hardcore fans. It's really painful to hear about this, but at the same time, it's so inevitable. You realize that Bandai America wasn't necessarily great at their own game, especially ever since they pretty much abandoned Power Rangers by 2018. Had the chance to buy it back then, said no, and then pretty much abandoned the whole entire product lines with whimpers. Oh, I can't think about like how else are you going to get Kamen Rider products? Because nowadays, some people would say it's a loss. But you're just scratching your head, just thinking like, this could have been avoided. This could have been absolutely mitigated. This could have been solved in so many ways, but they rather instead try to entrap you and gaslight you to believe that you are the ones to blame. You are the ones that are the problem, which is 100% incorrect. And I do feel like I'm repeating a lot of points here because this is whole entirely unscripted. If this was scripted, I would have just stated my points once, you know. This is how it happens with Megabits. It's been a while ever since I did an unscripted video, so it's sort of why I stopped doing these kind of videos for a while. But my conclusion is that, like, Bandai America really needs to step their game up when it comes to pretty much trying to capture their own market. Like, if they've fixated on their resources, particularly to Ultraman, they better make it work. They really have to make it work. Even with the aid of Super Riot Productions, it's like, they have to make it work. Now, I did skip out on the idea that, like, the shows are unavailable, but that's like a second bit of contention that has nothing to do with this. Because even in the 1970s with Shogun Warriors, there was literally no TV shows. This was like pre-FCC regulation eras where a lot of the product lines were not allowed to have television shows accompanying it. So they could have clearly done a Shogun Warriors route, but of course that is extensively outdated in terms of the business practices. So people are so fixated on the ideas as like, you could have just imported Kamen Rider, you could have imported the show as well. But at the same time, Toei Company is a very stubborn company when it comes to importation because in accordance to a lot of the licenses, each season of Kamen Rider costs about the same price as the licenses for a lot of the anime shows. Which I found out that makes a lot of sense because there's always a new production crew behind it. There's always new creators behind it. Poppy Planning Office, which is now known as Plex, are always assigned to these tasks every single time, like every financial year or so. And as a matter of fact, there's not really many avenues you can pretty much distribute your TV shows. Television isn't really going anywhere. Guess the closest thing you got is subscription services. Amazon Prime would have been a great start, but of course the stubbornness between like having a show's distributing your masters, which is also a big issue when it comes to like the video quality difference and just like if they're still worried about like reverse importing, then that becomes a bit of where you start to instead of the distribution. Shout Factory, the release just use broadcast masters, but the encoding, gratefully, is much more better than it was with Zero Once. I do like to go on to that, but that'd be another story again. So just temporarily focus on that. But it does kind of really conjoin with the idea that like their marketing strategy isn't really well thought of. Even if you can do it without the television show, you have to at least make an effort to push these products out. not just to young adults who have a lot of money. You're also missing like a huge sector of the market. Young children as well. Families, young children. Like I said, that's the market that is pretty much being unpenetrable because it seems as if they didn't want to put the effort to make it work. And believe me, because like you see a lot of those products in GameStops and they're relatively expensive compared to what other options you can get. I mean, like, they're selling them possibly at a profit. There's not many of these products that are being sold at a loss, which is relatively interesting because video game consoles are always sold at losses, but they can make like 10 times the money back. And polar opposite here because they just believe that in their minds, not much product is going to go out, so they have to jack up the prices really high and no one can really bother to afford them, or they just go into different avenue streams. Um, but I'm now lost for it because I just kind of really think that what the future is unprecedented. It's just like, what's going to happen next? Not really much, but the writing was on the wall ever since. Oh man, it's been a while.